Well, thank you. Look at this picture. 4 patterns of AI native development. What do you see? Anybody? 4 horses? Who knows why horses? You can't answer if you've already seen the talk. Because unicorns don't exist. We're all horses, right? And why the mist? Well, if there's something with AI, yes, we don't know where we're ending up with. There have been those people who say it's the 4 horses of the apocalypse. That could be true as well. So you don't know, right? So let's get into it. Coding. I assume you're all somewhere in your IDEs, tap, tap, go. That was the first one, Copilot. And then we got into ChatGPT. We're starting to do copy and paste, whatever we got in there, let's move it into the other. That's pretty tedious. So why not just say, whatever you come up with, just apply it to the code. All good, right? And then why have that, like, not change several lines, not one line, not one completion? The cool thing is, it cannot predict where my editor, my cursor needs to be. I do it here, you should probably start doing it here, right? Insane, right? It's not completion anymore, it's just prediction. It starts indexing our whole code bases, it's not one file anymore. It's just changing multiple files at the same time. So we're getting more and more lost, like it's doing so much more. It just started looking at our terminals as well. It looks at our browsers. Kind of a progression has been insane if you look at it. It started looking at our test coverage, right? Which is always a painful point in the company. How's your test coverage? But it comes up with the tests that we haven't come up with. It started reasoning about our code. And then now with the whole MCP craziness, it just has tools to change our code. It'll have linter, debugger, surf the internet. It's just expanding. When this came out, Devin, who's heard of Devin? All right, this autonomous coding loop, it took the world by storm. Some say it was a marketing stunt. They did get a lot of money, so good for them. But it was a continuous loop, you ask what you want, it looks at the code, there's a terminal, there's a browser, and it just has a continuous feedback loop of us doing actually this all the time when we're coding, right? Open the browser, no, search, okay. So we're getting further. Why not have multiple agents work on different pieces of the code base, right? Devin just says, like, you're very good at the front-end part, you're very good at the other part. That's where we're heading towards. And then more and more, this becomes asynchronously. We give it a task. It's not a couple of seconds. It's 15 seconds. It's a minute. We let it run. It just goes off longer and longer. So in a nutshell, when most people still think about AI, it's the LLM. If you look all the pieces that we added just over the span of a year to improve the results, it's actually impressive, right? So we come from the single thing to a team of agents working on our code base. So a lot of people were still in Copilot. They get this experience, and this is what is possible today. Okay, you all know Cursor and all the likes. There's loads of tools. I curated a website which called the Landscape AI Native Dev.io. At the screenshot, it had 220 tools. Now I'm at 300 tools. I track all the tools in the space, and the code generation category is just exploding. There's another tool in there. We had a hard time actually categorizing the tools because you would say, oh, one is an agent, one does this. But in the end, they're all going to do the same thing. They're all catching up from each other. This morning, Simon talked about the belief system, right? And we've seen this already with self-driving cars. We have no automation, and then it becomes like partial automation to full automation. The belief is if we just throw enough money at it, we just do enough investments, the belief is we'll solve the problem eventually. The reality is that given certain constricted cases, we can do it, but not in all cases. So we're still figuring out what the constricted and what kind of the cases are that it works and it doesn't work. Now, new technology, always bring news experts, and I'm an expert too now, right? And then much like cloud native, we're now talking about AI native. And the big thinking is, also mentioned this morning, we have to rethink how we work, our workflow, right? And then we get the surprises that we really want. There's this whole debate about will it render ourselves obsolete as a developer or whatever part in the SDLC. And I find this picture interesting in the way that if you look at all the tasks that the developer is doing, it's a multitude of things. It's not just coding, it's talking to customers, it's looking at the product, it's getting feedback, support. So some of those tasks will be rendered obsolete, some will get replaced, some will be enhanced, some new tasks will arrive. So it is not that simple than saying everything will be, the coding part is done. It kind of changes the field. And that always, when you hear that, will we still need the humans, right? That's kind of the ultimate autonomous level that people are craving for. Not everybody, of course, we don't, but there's a craving that we can go faster with the machines. Ultimately, also what they wanted from DevOps, but never happened. There's new jobs, right? We're training the AI, so you can just apply to solve problems, to train the AI. I don't know, not the job that I want to do, but it definitely exists. So I started I got the question, can you predict the future? Of course, I can't, never could. So what I always do is I look at more of trends and patterns, what people are doing. I think it's too soon to derive principles of it, but that's the journey I'm going to take you on, like what I see as patterns where things are moving. I could be wrong, but anyway, it's good to be aware of whatever is happening. So much like the multiple tasks, the premise is all the little pieces that are happening here, there's going to be change. We're going to do different things. And from some parts, we're going to move into more of the product owner. We're going to do some more operational parts. We're going to be the architect because the coding is done. Or we're going to move into knowledge management. So kind of that shifting around of our job. So first thing, from producer to manager. The more code you're producing, there's a tendency also AI generates longer code than we do and bigger chunks of code. So no surprise there. The time we gain into generating the code, we actually spend in reviewing the code. So that's kind of balancing in a way. So one of the things that you start seeing in the tools is they want to help us review the code. And this is, you have the traditional view on doing a diff, red and green, saying, well, just tell me whether it's okay. I hate that view. I'm colorblind, by the way. I can see the difference, so it's not that, but it's clunky to look at. Then here's a chat of everything I did. I don't want to read that. It's too verbose. And then I found a very elegant way from Cursor, who kind of said, this is the piece before. It just put the ... code. This is the piece after, and it summarized the change. Right? Really helpful in me not having to grasp the whole thing, but kind of assisting me. Then another typical thing is when you do a review, you want to break it down in steps. First do this review, then do that review, then do that review. That's helping you focus on specific parts to do that. So that's another popular kind of pattern that comes up. And why are we stuck just at text? Why is it not generating diagrams and helping us to understand? Sometimes the diagram is a lot easier to see the impact and the change than to look at the code, what it does. That brings indeed multiple development, it was mentioned, but imagine your generic code editor could adapt itself to the problem you're reviewing. When you're reviewing something domain specific, it adapts. When you're doing something that needs more graphical, it adapts. So that's quite interesting as a concept. Now, why are we even reviewing? Why is it not auto-committing? You see first experiments happening by Ada. It just commits. If you're not happy, you can undo. Because why do we still have to say OK? So they reversed it by saying, if you're not happy, undo it. But by default, it should be OK. Interesting. Now, with these longer running threads, it's not about rolling back the previous thing. It's like, where in the whole generation was it taking a bad turn? So you can roll back in the checkpoints, which is another way and kind of an easier way than to say, please do the whole thing over again. No, at the end it failed. No, over again. So kind of that checkpoint is something that is happening. You started to see, much like access control for humans, that the editors are saying, AI, never touch this file. Whatever you do, you have no authority. Please don't change my test files. Please don't change my specifications while you're generating them. So a whole access control thing is coming up in those things. And it's becoming quite elaborate. If you look at this, like, do you allow the AI to read your projects, read all files, edit them, execute commands, use the browser? And it just keeps expanding on what authority do you actually give them. And then you also want to look at costs. Right? You see, I run this task. It cost me $10 to do this task. So you get a little bit of awareness of what it's been doing in there, how many tokens you use, the caching, that's more internal. But the fact that it's showing the cost, hey, this is interesting. And it's more about managing the thing than it's actually doing the thing. There's the YOLO pattern. What they found is that the acceptance rates of generated code by humans go up in the weekend. All right? Just get out of my way. Solve it. So imagine if you're under pressure. Just accept that. So we should be aware, obviously, on that. And when things break, all right, how are we going to debug this, right? It's going to be interesting times. And maybe this is our job. Because in the end, we're still responsible for doing whatever the agent is doing. Much like a manager is responsible for whoever is in their department and doing it. For me, with my history around DevOps, it's reminding me of this kind of journey. We were very obsessed early on about automating everything with infrastructure as code. Then we figured out we needed CI/CD and tests suite to run this. Then we figured out, once in production, we actually needed better monitoring. So that kind of whole monitoring sucks movement kind of got like monitoring love movement. We started design for failure because we knew there was going to be failure. So the resilience engineering became a craft. And then we didn't know what to think of in the monitoring anymore. So we made observability because then we could deal with the unknowns eventually. And because we got so good at this, we needed chaos engineering to train ourselves because we weren't dealing with enough problems anymore. Right? So think of this as where we are now at is dabbling here, and I hope something comes there. I have no clue where it's heading, and you see some hints, but it's definitely the more you automate, the less you know what you're doing, and then the more you have to train for this. All right, so this was managing stuff. Whether you're in production, you're responsible, you're the code it produces. But now we take a step earlier. We have to tell what we want, not just look at what it did. We have to tell what we want. So this is the part where we move from implementing things ourselves to telling it what to do, specifying the intent. And the early things of this you saw by you have a markdown file, and you include that specification markdown file inside your prompt. And you start reusing this as a specification. So you don't have to type this over and over again. You just say, I changed something of the specification. Please do the changes. And you started having technical specifications that people started sharing in shareable prompts. This is how you do mobile development. These are the guidelines for Python. These are the things. So they're all become like a library of prompts that you can reuse to do your specifications. What we really want is we give it a task, and it starts break down in multiple subtasks, and then it does the execution eventually. So the way GitHub phrases it is, we want to move from code stacks or completion to a not chat, but we want to actually say, we want a task, it has a specification, it comes up with a plan, and then it produces the code. So there's an intermediate step that you aren't maybe always seeing right now, but kind of breaking this down into like smaller pieces as well. And so they started calling this intent-based coding. You specify what you want, it gets executed. And then this tool actually moved it further away. This is almost like a Google Docs interface. That's just describe what you want. Collaborate on the specification, and under the hood, things are just being generated. So the PRD as the input, the product requirements document, that is a collaborative tool to kind of specify what you want. And you can mix it with diagrams. You can have a still a view, a multi view on some code, some specification, because it's interesting. If I spaced it, if I change the specification, which part of the code is impacted? So that's interesting to see, code to spec, spec to code, and kind of that bidirectional kind of view. And then I want to mention Spark. I think that really did a really good job at specifying a lot of prompts that are good for structuring, reasoning, and doing development. Just check it out. It's too big to explain, but it's definitely on the front end, and they start calling it more agentic engineering. It's not about like building the agents, but more like specifying what the agents should be doing. Because it's getting so easy, and maybe I'm not saying cheaper, because some models are still expensive, we can aim for more, right? We don't have to just do the one thing. We can give it a larger chunk that we can do. And there's this whole, I was going to say fantasy, but you never know, it could be reality in the end. The way they phrase it is software delivered services. So the premise is, why am I still paying for subscriptions from tools if I can just describe the tools and have it built internally? It's almost like a 3D printer, which you all get excited about, and then you never touch anymore. But you could theoretically build anything inside, right? So will that change? Maybe for smaller pieces, because if you're buying something expensive, why not build it that way? Anyway, maybe there's somewhere in between. But it shows you where the reasoning are at. This is the aspiration where people want to go for, right? Just disrupt the whole space. I found this an interesting quote. Applies also to AI. Don't tell people how to do things, tell them what to do, and let them surprise you, right? It's actually also with AI, right? Oh, I didn't know you could do it that way, right? So surprise could be a good thing. So I've taken you from the generation of supervision of watching the code being generated to specifying intent, so we're abstracting a little bit more away. But how do we actually know what we want to build? That's the step even before. So instead of caring about the delivery, we care about discovering the right thing to build. And product owners love these tools to come up with ideas with customers. They just look at the whole Twitter feed and say, well, customers seem to like this. They want this, like new idea. So obviously that creation, exploratory thing is something. Why not still do the manual research and serve the web if you can have a tool do the research for you and bring ideas back? Why don't you describe what you do, and AI will tell you the gap. No, you should do this step here. Like you missed something there. So kind of that is learning about the domain. From a blank canvas, completing designs the way you want it, exploratory, mocking, prototyping. And I think that is where vibe coding, in a way, fits in. Like, I have this high energy freeze of 1 day and a half. I just vibe code, and it helps me actually understand the problem. So I don't worry for a while on the code, on the delivery, on it being perfect, but I learn so much about what I really want. Oh, that feature. Oh, that, yeah, actually, I never thought of that. So that, for me, is partly that value of the vibe coding. But usually, with the current tooling, it breaks down after a day and a half. And then I have to kind of go from scratch, because then it grinds to a halt. Maybe we could stretch this. But that, for me, is exploratory learning on what we actually need to build. This could be either for the product, but could be also exploratory on a technical level. Oh, I've never tried this. Let's try that. Proof of concept. So you will see this more and more. This is lovable. Building prototypes, getting previews. This is Figma to code. Like, let's take the designs. I'm terrible at designs. But I also found that if the design is not well specified, it outputs rubbish. So we're back at specification. But you get the interesting thing. Because things are getting so cheap, why generate one option? Why not 3? Why not 5? And then pick the best one. Or have AI pick the best one and suggest it to you. That workflow, again, like I said, that bidirectional view is kind of design to view, spec to view. It's kind of all blurring in that aspect. And then much like that Google Doc of collaboration, why not collaborate on the preview, on the prototype, and have multiple people give their feedback at the same time? So it's almost like mob coding, mob vibe coding, but getting the exploratory thing out there as a group. And this one made me really think. So when a customer asks a new feature, has to go down like a whole path of the product owner allowing it to be built and whether it fits the budget and all that stuff. They take the premise, if you have a tool, why not have the end user vibe code the interface that it needs on your product, right? So this is taking A/B testing to the next level, because you're allowing them to actually explore what they need as an end user, right? I think that's fascinating. Last pattern, from content to knowledge. And there's a lot of content, and most people sometimes call it context. We put all the content we have in our context window, whether that's our Slack message, whether that's our wiki, whether that's our tickets, documentation, if we finally have some, we put it all in. Our coding identities, right? You're a very good, experienced coder. You do it like this. It's also kind of context. This is how we do things around here, which is context. You start also seeing AI, how it helps us keep this up to date. You change something in production, you should keep your documentation up to date. You change something in your API, you should keep that up to date. And how about we get feedback from production, and the example I always give is when the vibe coding is touching a function that's used by 1 million people in production, maybe you should review this, right? So kind of like, or this always is a very brittle piece of code. So kind of like bidirectional feedback through the systems. We can learn from incidents, incident responses. This shows that it's just easier to write incident responses. The more context you have, it's being generated by AI, still being reviewed, but it definitely helps on that knowledge. And you can start exploring code bases, right? What do you want to know about my code base, right? If you're onboarding a new team member, how long does it usually take? Now they can ask all the questions they want. So we're turning the content into knowledge that they can learn. And this is one that is specifically even generates lessons up front. So they don't have to ask, but it just creates a bunch of lessons on your code. Onboarding devs, indeed. And then the question comes up, do we really need to understand coding anymore? Because it's taking on it, like take the red pill, take the blue pill. Do I really want to care? Do I really want to know? Maybe it's a vanity that we still need to want to know. I don't know nothing about the internals of cars, but some do want to know everything about the cars. So maybe it's a matter of pride. And then it comes up like, younger people, do they still want to learn this profession? Because it's all automated. What should we learn? Now, this is a question that gets mostly asked by senior people. If I ask to the junior people, they say, well, I've never learned so fast thanks to AI. So there's a flipping effect. Is they can become a senior because they don't have to wait until somebody tells them how it works. They can get like feedback from the AI as a personal tutor. So imagine we're building all the knowledge, we're keeping that as a memory, and we kind of bring that into the fabric of our organization. How many knowledge is lost when the person leaves the company? How many things we have to do over and over again? After 5 years, somebody tries the same thing again. Right? So imagine we could keep that memory. And I find this a fascinating example is Devin is having a conversation, a chat conversation with you about building this thing. And all of a sudden he says, I think this is important knowledge. Should we save this? Could you clarify? So once it's clarified, I don't have to explain this again, and the next person can reuse this. So it's almost like in-context learning of the model, which is not exactly what it means, but it just learns as you go from you. Now, if you're not the perfect expert, you can give the wrong answer, and everybody's screwed now, but it could also be powerful. And most people kind of on a PR, they already get the summary, and it's being generated. But what if somebody asks a question, and your agent starts replying on your behalf? Because it has all the knowledge. Why wait for that human still to do this? So those are things that are going on right now in the tooling. And that brings up the fact is that threat, some people are scared about this. Will I lose my job? Will I not lose my job? It has shown that if your company has a learning culture and supports you in figuring out like how it works, what you can do, explore new things, you stand a better chance in your career. Right? If it's all fear-driven, I'm sorry, but I don't think that's the company that might survive. So this gives you, in a nutshell, we've shown that from implementation, from producer to manager, is actually you're all becoming ops persons now. That's our life, ever been. You throw the code at us, and then we say, oh, looks good to me, let's go into production. So congratulations, you're all managers and you're all ops persons. The implementation to intent, you're all architects now, right? You got to say, this is good, this is bad, this is what we want. This is how we specify things, this is how we learn things in there. And delivery, all product owners, we're getting closer. We need to understand the domain. What are we actually building? And then the knowledge is we become more data science, content management, knowledge management persons. We kind of have to deal with this stuff. Now, if you're a senior developer, you likely already broke out of your comfort zone here to have a better understanding of the business, better how it was run, better how it was internally it would be structured, and already kind of start documenting and writing some knowledge on this, right? So will this mean that everybody will move and shift? I think as parts of our jobs become easier, change, that's something to explore. And that's the value of kind of having new parts of that. Now, in an organization, we remember Conway's law, how the way we structure our organization has an impact on the way our technology is produced or what we actually can produce. So if you organized more in smaller departments, you go for microarchitecture, and bigger has different architecture. So we're limited in that space. Now, there's a flip side to this. Reverse Conway, the way technology works has an impact on how we are structuring our business. So what impact is AI having on our structures? Now, first one was a pretty easy one. Who owns AI in a company? Is it the data? Is it the engineering company? There was some debate. And I think most people started moving this into something similar to a platform team, but for AI, where kind of that ownership goes across all the teams using AI. So luckily, we had a pattern for that and how we scale this out. Now, will we have less leaders, right? And we're going to reduce this, and it becomes less of a headcount and more of a compute. Maybe it's just going to be more expensive, and it's going to be both, right? Where you get, there was this story about somebody doing coding with agents, and he was spending $80 a day on coding generation. That's already a lot, right? And he was having 4 agents run that for him. So is that tipping to compute? Then it becomes a commodity. The impact on the team? So I find this interesting. Henrik Nieberg is the one who kind of also championed the tribes in Spotify. So we were advocating for overlapping diversity of people in a team. But if you look at with AI, it kind of becomes skewed. But how many people can we actually then keep in that team, and how much overlap do we need to have? Again, it's what people are experimenting with. I think technology is the first, and then organizational impact is even further away of understanding what the real impact is. But you start seeing the solo entrepreneur, the solo kind of thing, because it reduces a lot of communication. And maybe that's kind of the model that we're heading for. So the smaller teams could be a way. Then it becomes like a super team of smaller teams. Then we're back at the bigger team. So do we need specialists or generalists? If you're a generalist, you can do multiple things, like the diagram showing you, and you know just enough to be dangerous. Thanks to AI, you get like a companion. But sometimes you need a very specific person, so that stays, but maybe we just need less on these things. What we do know is that maybe the cycles will get smaller, like typically Agile 2-week sprint. Could we get to a 1 week, right? Because that work just takes less, so it's a lot more on communication. And is AI there to support us still? And will it kind of have a layer that it can do autonomously or not? So that's one of the questions. I know there's people dreaming of whole companies about software agents. They'd say, I'm an investor, there's the boss, the product owner, and they just let the simulation run. I once did the experiment, and I know it's always a point in time. I had a developer expert, a DevOps expert, and a DevSecOps expert look at a piece of code. And I asked them the simplest thing, can you please list the files in the current directory? It should be in ls. Short answer, right? So you see, the first answer is like, yeah, I think it's ls, developer. DevOps person said, I think we should check whether you're root, and you should check whether you're on Ubuntu. And the DevSecOps person said, well, you need to check all your variables, and you just saw the whole script grow. Probably this is also how, in real life, the developers actually work, like complexity with experts in the room. Now, sometimes we have the unwanted behavior of AI, right? It's been biased, it's been trained on stuff that might not be our culture. And you might see toxic behavior like on the workflow, but now with agents. If one agent influences other agents, the whole thing can go bad. So we have to start thinking about how do we handle these cases as such? And then we start thinking about, is AI inclusive? Is it still letting people in, letting it understand? Will it have like a secret language? Who knows kind of this commercial? So it's an experiment in a supermarket in Sweden where people, to enter the store, the only thing they need to do is to smile. Right? If you're not smiling, you can't shop in the shop. Right? So that kind of, how much does it allow you to have the human in the loop? So people have started to write code of conducts for agents. Like this is OpenAI, and they use this model specification, and they say you should always help the user, you should always do this. So it's code of conduct in a certain way. But are we inclusive to our overlords, right? Will they turn our back on us? I know, it's pretty lame, but they don't have feelings, right? It's a completion, it's technology. But it brings you into, we have team topologies. Are there agent team topologies? Is AI always helping us? Will it be able to kind of direct some of the team members what they need to do? Like, I look at your backlog, I think we should do this, we should do that. Or does it go more on the top? And could we have that like team of agents or company of agents with the one person getting the revenue? So I don't know, but it's interesting to kind of see how far we want to stretch this. And I know I've taken it from the more tangible, this is what I see in tools, to this is what impacts in the organization, but it's always more fuzzy in organizational structures. But you're going to have the same debate with agents. How much are agents going to be able to charge? Right? You're going to have the generalist agents. Maybe that's the John Doe coder. And then you have the COBOL coder agent. Right? You can charge more. Or the close your final quarter coder that like gets every project across the line. You're willing to pay more, but you only need it in case of emergency, right? So that kind of thing. People have been including equivalents of agents into the org chart. He's free 22.4 hours a month, and this is the agent. So they start comparing productivity. I think the experiment went wrong in that company, but people are exploring. And then somebody said, well, are you working above or below the algorithm? Is something defining what you're going to say or not? I think we're already being influenced by algorithms. And why are we still working? Why can't we have agents apply for a job and do the job? So that becomes a different economy of specialized trained agents, consultancy agents in there as well. And then they are open to work, but it's actually the agent. But then we have to talk performance reviews on agents. Right? So what's the ultimate performance review? I give you a budget, here's the output. Okay, we're happy. Right? So people are doing that experiment and they say, here's $1,000. I don't care how you do it, just do the job. And you might think, oh, it's far off, but I know people are doing this. They set incentives for the agents like that right now to do research, to do competitive stuff. So it isn't that contrived as you think it might be. We could argue whether they have become an employee, yes or no. That after 3 days was withdrawn from that website. It was a marketing stunt, of course. And we already talked about digital twins earlier. Can we actually simulate our orgs? If we have enough context, enough what people are doing, enough what they are actually supposed to do, what their job description is, We look at all their metrics. Can we simulate whether maybe adding a person here could get better revenue? Is it a good match? And then, OK. I know it feels really alien, maybe, up on that level, but you do have to think about it. I'm sorry. There's the tangible stuff, and then there's the stuff that is coming, and then there's the stuff that we don't know that's coming, but people are already experimenting with. And I'm not a doomsayer or something, but we got to think about that. So that's so far the best I got. In the structure, I hope it helps you kind of see whether you can take up some new tasks, whether you can start experimenting, maybe write some specifications, go from there. That was 2 days ago. We have a conference, a lot of talks about coding with AI are on YouTube. So if you're interested in that to get some inspiration, go there. Or you can go to my YouTube channel where most of my talks are. If you're interested in that, you go in all directions. In case you're still interested in DevOps, I have 150 videos on DevOps. I'm never going to talk about DevOps anymore. And that is me. Thank you very much.